But first, to quote the American statesman and inventor Benjamin Franklin, nothing in life is certain except death and taxes. But it's a tragic fact that untimely deaths often catch all those involved entirely unprepared. Such deaths can lead to lifelong regrets for those left behind at all the things left unsaid on both sides. Lee Wengler was just 43 years old when she died of cancer in July 2007. She left behind a husband, Joe, and 2 children, Lucas and Ellie. But Lee also left an hour-long DVD of her reflections on her life, filmed just a week before she died. The film was shot by a US-based non-profit organisation called Life Chronicles, which has made about 600 such recordings, and not just of the terminally ill, but also of people in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease and US soldiers going off to Iraq and Afghanistan. When Lee's husband Joe and Kate Carter, the founder of Life Chronicles, came into the Outlook studio, I began by asking Joe why he and Lee had decided to record her thoughts on life and death.
A lot of people that are sick, it's advised that they put together these little memory boxes or sort of scrapbooks. That Lee found very difficult because just the whole reviewing her life. And you know what? Part of it was she just didn't want to do it. And then when she ran out of time, the opportunity came. And it was actually a week before she passed that the interview was scheduled. So by that point, she'd come to terms with the probability that she was going to die probably soon. And she had nothing to lose. And she was very relaxed on the day. And then she did it.
Hi, guys. Took me a long time to think about how I should start this video. And so I thought about all the things that I wished I'd asked my mum before she died. She died 5 years ago. And there's a lot of things about her early life and her beliefs and things that I never really talked to her about. So I thought maybe I'd start at the beginning and talk some about my early life and what my beliefs and what has led me to where I am now, which is happily married with 2 beautiful, beautiful children.
She started taping, I don't know what to say, it was 1 o'clock, and she just talked for an hour and a half.
Was it difficult for her?
It wasn't. It was really strange. She had come to terms with what was going to happen to her, and so it was actually pretty fun. She had not a script, but she obviously had in mind some sort of flow, and she was prompted by the producer and the cameraman at different points to keep things flowing. But, she really enjoyed doing it and going over those memories, and some of them were very funny.
At one point I had purple streaks in my hair, which I had to be very careful of so that I could just do it underneath. And when I went to school, I was able to curl it so they couldn't see it. And then when I came out of school, I would push it back so that everyone could see it. And then I just followed the trends, I guess. New Romantics for a while. Then I got into soul, Northern Soul, that was good. And now it's totally eclectic, so it doesn't really follow any pattern. In fact, if you want to know what the latest interests were, then you have to look on my iPod.
What did your kids make of that, seeing their mum as a new romantic with purple streaks?
Yeah, she had some pretty crazy haircuts, pretty funny outfits. The kids, my daughter especially, the fashion, the hair, interest in looking different, yeah, they think that's pretty funny, cute. And, she was fun.
Regrets? I don't have any. I guess the only thing I would change is having cancer, but there's nothing I can do about that, so... People often ask me if I'm angry, and I say, why me? But then I sort of think, well, why not me? It happens to people every day, but it would have been nice to have been around longer to see the kids growing up, but it's not to be, so I kind of try not to think about that too much.
That's obviously something that must be very difficult to hear repeatedly, because whatever she says, and she seems to have a lot of courage, it must strike you as terribly, terribly unfair.
To be fair, it took her a long time to get to that point. It took probably 6 months to to form that kind of view, and a lot of thinking and talking to people and reading and exploring different treatments and whatever. But she didn't feel sorry for herself, and she didn't think that life was unfair. She felt perhaps it was unfair for the children, or who knows, but she had a very positive view despite the terrible prospect that she had. Strange.
How did you both feel after the taping was finished?
I think she was just completely wiped out. I don't think we talked about it much, not after that. She was, her energy reserves were pretty low, so I think she just put everything into that interview. So, going over things, we didn't really have the luxury.
And how did it feel watching it a couple months afterwards?
It's pretty emotional, obviously. It's pretty fascinating. It's just amazing that she could talk like that, considering a week later she was dead.
Did you show it to your children when it arrived?
Yeah, we watched it together.
How did they react?
They were glued to it, especially when she talks about them. They love it.
I remember Ellie this morning saying, "You're not going to die today, Mummy, are you?" And I said, "No, not today." And she said, "Oh, that's okay then." And then went happily off to her art class. They just think a day at a time, and that's good. And it makes me feel secure in dying, that, obviously it'll upset them, but it won't devastate them. Not until they become famous in their 30s and blame it all on losing their mother at 10.
I have to just ask you whether listening to this doesn't in some ways make you miss her more and sort of reopen the wounds. Watching the video.
Yeah, it's. I think you could get consumed by it. I'm sure some people, die of a broken heart. That's not going to happen to me.
Kate, can I talk to you about why you founded Life Chronicles? Where did the idea come from?
A very dear friend of mine was diagnosed with breast cancer just 6 weeks after her husband passed from ALS. We call it Lou Gehrig's disease. And I had done a television internship a couple of years before, and I really loved the work, and I didn't really care for commercial television, but I loved the medium. And I'd always felt that if I was going to pursue work with it, it was going to be something meaningful, or I wasn't going to go that way. So when my friend was diagnosed, just like any friend, I walked around for days mentally wringing my hands. What can I do? What can I do to help my friend? I knew I couldn't save her body, and so I had to find a way to save her for her children. So I called her and said, "Terry, let's sit you in front of a camera, and I want you to tell the children everything you'd like them to remember for the rest of their lives." And she was thrilled with the idea. But the first big lesson I learned with this work was not to wait. And, I'm sure Joe would understand, there were days I could talk to her about it. She'd be very excited. And there were other days I wouldn't go near it. So we didn't get the taping done. She, like I said, we would talk about it and she would be excited. And then there were other days I couldn't talk about it. And then literally she had called me 10 days before she died and said, "Katie, I need to take some downtime and recuperate my strength. So would you cover my work for me for a month?" And she was gone 10 days later. So you see, she never, even though she'd been told she had a terminal diagnosis, still didn't quite believe what was happening. And so that was my big rude awakening the day she died. And that was the day I said, I can't talk about this anymore. I have to do this, have to start this for other people.
And what do you think people get out of these recordings?
Well, it's different for everyone. I listened to Joe talk about their family, and there are similarities, but there are certain things that are particular to people, which is one reason we don't tell people what they should talk about. But I do know that it's different for the person who's being taped than it is for the family that receives the video. But what we've seen for the person being taped, like Lee, is that it's very empowering for them. And they get to say the things that they need to say, that they want to be remembered. And I know for young parents like Lee, we know that it allows them to continue to parent their child, which is so important to them. They don't want to leave. Often it's an important thing that they tell the children that they don't want to leave. Often children think that for some reason, because of them, their parents aren't here. And those are issues that these videos really help with. And then we know what it means to the families, and particularly children. You know, it's such a developmental thing for them to be able to have the sight and sound of that person. That's why hearing Joe talk about the kids really mesmerized, that's what we hear over and over, that they're just really, and I do think that they may not even hear what their parents said for a while more than they absorb the sight and the sound of them to re-experience them.
Do you only take people who are adults and children who are terminally ill, or do you do other kinds of things?
No, we wanted to find as many useful things as we could do with this medium that would be helpful to people, and particularly in crisis. And so we taped a young woman pregnant with twins that she was going to place for adoption. And she sat down 3 days before she gave birth to these children that she knew she was going to not see again, and explained what happened and why she made this decision and how she felt about it. And then we've done people in military who are being deployed so that while they're away, their child can watch the video over and over and over. And if the worst happens and they aren't returned to their family, then this is how that child will know who that parent was.
Joe, can you just tell me about what you think the long-term benefits are to you and your children, this DVD that you have?
There's different levels. There's the obvious ones that I think Kate mentioned, and you'd imagine they'd want to know what their mother's like and what she sounded like and what she looked like, and that she loved them. And this is just such a rich source of information and sound that I think when they get older, when they get sick of me, angry with me, you know, wouldn't surprise me at all if they look at that and see, you know, what would mommy say about this situation? I don't think it's something they're going to be watching all the time. I think it's something they'll go back to and sample every now and then and look at a particular section that they remember, maybe as a reference point. And then there's one thing that struck me, because I did watch it this week before I came in, just to kind of remind myself of it, and it was interesting about how she felt about us. It wasn't just, you know, how we remember her, but it's how she loved us.
Joe Wengler and Kate Carter.